The detail on these is truly amazing. Hi there to you, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Coke, welcoming you up here to the loft on Weir Yard. Now today we've got a little project going on. I'm going to be making a diorama using some of the products that West Hill Wagon Works very kindly sent into the channel for review. And I've been incredibly impressed by a lot of these. They do an awful lot of detail in parts, and some of them are actually really ambitious, and I've been blown away by the quality and the detail, certainly in things like they sent a class 52 Bogey and a class 47 power unit, and the detail on these is absolutely incredible, and it just really keeps on giving. As you paint and weather these, the detail really comes to life. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so what I'm planning to do is, along with some of the class 25 cabs, the class 45 cab, and a number of other bits and pieces, I thought this was perfect to do a scrapyard scene. Now, I've had some of the scale model scenery diorama boards for a little while now. These are laser cut in MDF, and this is going to use one half of one of the kits that they sell, and certainly it's nice as a standalone diorama, but you could also use this idea to maybe fill a corner of your own layout. Corners are often notoriously difficult to do anything really great with, other than maybe have a hillside or a bit of a town scene, but this gives the opportunity to maybe have a siding going into a private little yard where you can model that scrap and dereliction that really does look great on a model railway. So come with me in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, and with additional support provided by TMC, the Model Centre, the friendly family-run shop with the extensive and comprehensively stocked website of not just all new items from all the major manufacturers, but a whole host of second-hand, pre-loved and really hard to find items. So check them out today at themodelcentre.com. I'm really excited to finally be doing something with these West Hill Wagon Works items, and just before we head into the main video, there is a link in the description box down below to help you find all of the items plus many more besides that are featured in today's video. So let's get to it. I'd like to thank West Hill Wagon Works, who very kindly sent over a whole load of different products, and I've picked from these some which I think are going to work really well for a small detailed scrapyard diorama. And the first three of these I've got laid out here. These are exactly how they come when you buy them from West Hill Wagon Works, but I've picked out from what they've sent over this class 47 power unit, and I think that this is going to look really quite interesting. You could imagine this having been taken out of a class 47, end of life, the locomotive's getting cut up, and this just gets put to one side looking really work stained, grubby, dirty, and maybe a decision has yet to be made. Is this something that's going to be saved, or whether it's for the gas axe? They also do a whole range of different wheel sets and bogies, things like that, and I really like these, the class 08 shunter wheel sets, and I guess at Works you often saw these when they were getting repaired, refurbished, and I suppose they would quite often get swapped between locomotives as well. But here we can imagine these being used as an end-of-life thing. The locomotive that they came off has been cut up, and again these are dumped in the dirt and are just waiting to meet their final demise with a gas axe. We've also got here the class 24 and 25 wheel sets. Same deal here, you could have these in a work situation. They actually do come with this cradle, so you could put these into something like the ZDV wagon from Bachmann in the engineer's olive green would be a really good thing to add these into. And indeed, we've previously done a little project with the West Hill Wagon Works HAA wheel sets, which also come with a cradle, and they also make a really great wagon load. A couple of items which have always really caught my eye in the West Hill Wagon Works range are the Class 25 cabs, and you could imagine buying a whole load of these and arranging them into a stack just like in Vic Berry's Scrapyard, and maybe even use them as your back scene rather than having buildings or painting scenery onto a back scene. Why not actually pile up these Class 25 cabs, weathered up, looking really down at heel, and make them the back scene to your scrapyard layout? I've got two here. They come with the cab bulkheads as well as a separately fitted part, so there's plenty of options here to paint up and detail these, and I think these are going to look really, really great. And that fits in with those Class 25 wheel sets that I've just shown you as well. You can imagine there's a Class 25 just getting carved up, in fact maybe multiple ones, because we've got here also from the range Scrap Class 25 cabs, and these are further down the road of being cut up, so you can see it's just the cab roof, the cab front, and they've got these lovely angular lines down the edges where you could imagine a gas axe has cut through all of these. And these really do make some really amazing scrap detail parts. We've got some cab doors. These here are the doors for the internal bulkhead. So plenty of extra parts here. There's really a lot going on, and quite looking forward to detailing these up. And these do look to be exactly the same style of cabs as we've got here as the full cabs, so just mix and match between these, and that's really going to give us some great focal points on this diorama. The final product, which they've very, very kindly sent over, is this Class 52 Western Bogey. And these really do come alive. One of the regulars in the Monday Club, Mark Wilson, has used these to such great effect on his Swindon Works diorama. So I think that if there's enough space, one of these weathered and dirtied up, choked in old oil, brake dust and dirt, will really look quite superb, maybe even on a small length of track, as if it's been rolled out of the works and been decided that it's unfit for further use and just been rolled into the cutting area. One other product that they have sent over that I do want to make an extra special mention of, not one that I'll be using in this diorama, but I want to mention it anyway because I love these. And these are the bridge girder centre supports. They come in packs of 2, and you will have seen on my photo diorama that we did in a video a little while ago, I used one of the centre girders from another pack that they sent me, and it really does look great if you build your girder bridge around with these extra bits of detail between the tracks. It really does look superb. Now, we're not going to use these on this diorama, but I just wanted to mention these because they're one of my favourite products from West Hill Wagon Works. So we've got all of these products here, and what we're going to do is first of all remove them from the sprue. They are 3D printed, so you can see there that we've got a lot of these carrier pieces that just support the resin as it's being printed. We're going to remove all of that. I'm going to just use a pair of side sprue cutters and just very, very carefully remove all of these, and then we're going to give all of these a quick coat of plastic primer spray. Just blast over with an aerosol can, and then we're ready to paint and detail, and we can start building these up into that diorama scene. The diorama scene is really coming together, and I've used some of this Reditex. It's a textured building material, self-adhesive. I had a sheet hanging about, so I've just stuck that on to form a back wall, and really it's just some way of edging off the scene. And I've painted up and weathered some of the West Hill Wagon Works products that I showed you earlier on. I've really got to show you how these have turned out. So you can see here the Class 47 prime mover, which is the engine unit and the main generator. This has some incredible detail, and all I've actually done to this, it's really easy. I gave it a quick coat of Humbrol number 64, which is a very light sea grey. I used to use it a lot on the Airfix battleship kits that I used to build as a kid. And then over the top of that, I've used the Humbrol black weathering wash. Just a quick sploosh over, no real reason or rhyme to how it's fallen, and then I wipe it back when that has just started to dry. So any areas like there, I use just a piece of kitchen roll, and you can also even at this stage use your fingers or your thumb, and I find this does a really quite good effect as you kind of wipe clean some of the raised bits of the detail. And you can see there though, the amount of detail in this 3D print is incredible. So much so that I thought burying this into a pile of scrap was an utter waste. So I've got this kit-built wagon, which is in need of a bit of a repaint. We'll go over that and just give it a coat of probably something like black. Have it done as an internal user wagon, which can sit on this railhead, and that prime mover could just sit on top, and this provides a lot of scope to really show this off and have it as a focal point in the foreground. Now I'm just going to put that to one side, and I'm going to talk you through some of the other bits and pieces. We've got a series of the Class 25 scrap cabs from the West Hill Wagon Works range, and these always make me think of the Vic Berry scrap pile. Plenty of detail to them. The insides I haven't been too fastidious with because they're going to be largely hidden, but I've given them a coat of, in fact actually two coats of Phoenix Precision Paints Rail Blue, although that is incredibly glossy. Doesn't really, it looks like it got treated ex works and then immediately scrapped, so we will be toning that down with weathering powders and dirty washes. I've used Humbrol number, I think it's number 99, which is a matte lemon yellow, and I always think that this is a great colour for faded rail yellow, and that's actually brought the front faces of these cabs up nicely. So you can imagine these placed somewhere along the back. They've been cut off the full locomotive, and for whatever reason the cabs have been set to one side, possibly for use as spare cabs, I don't know. I've also got, and this was something that they sent a while ago and I did feature on the channel, but I love this, the Class 40 cab with the nose cut off, exposing all of that internal detail. Now this was painted with a different Humbrol colour, which really does replicate that faded rail blue quite nicely. But I tried using this blue actually on those cabs and it didn't look right, so I don't think I got the right one, but in the absence of being able to find it, I'm just going to try and tone those down with weathering. So we've got that extra cab, and we can create that Vic Berry pyramid of stuff. There's also a number of cut up bits of Class 25 cab, and I do like these. Again, West Hill Wagon Works, we've got the front face there, and I've also got the pieces of Class 25 scrapped cabs. Again, West Hill Wagon Works 3D printed. That's the front panel. I've already painted that up in the faded rail yellow, and it'll get rust around the edges to replicate where it's been gas axed apart, and then that would quickly rust. There's the cab roof cut off, and stuff like this is actually really good. You can upend it, and again it becomes a focal point We've got the top of a cab front, along with a bit of the roof. Again, these are great for just posing in a scrap area. And we've got some bulkheads here too. I didn't really go to town on painting these up because I'm going to have them in a pile. We've got a cab door, and then we've also got another cab door and one of the internal bulkhead doors as well. There's still a few little bits to remove there. I've just got those off. Being 3D printed, the little pieces that held these when they were being printed and stopped them distorting are actually really easy to remove. And I've just done a quick blast over with bits of colour. Now again, this is another standout product. You can really see that the Class 52 Bogey has come alive just with a coat of, it's supposed to be matte black actually, Humbrol number 33, but the newer tinlets do seem to have a bit of an issue. They're not how I remember them as a kid, so that's come out more of a satiny finish. That is dry. It's had a couple of days to dry off, and that's going to go through a weathering process. But again, the detail on these is truly amazing. That is another absolutely standout product from the West Hill Wagon Works range. They also sent over those Class 8 wheels, again just giving them a quick paint with the matte black. There is a cab door that's ended up down there somehow, got stuck in. I just gave it a blast over with black paint. Actually I think it's one of the bulkhead doors. And there's also a cab chair as well, 2 cab chairs just down there, which came as part of the kit for all of that. Again, these are great parts to, not just in this case, litter a scrapyard, but you could imagine these either as a load in a wagon, going out after refurbishment, or maybe coming back to be refurbished from a far-flung depot. So there's a lot of uses you can put these to. They're still on the 3D printed base, as are the Class 25 wheel sets. Now again, I'm going to use these to represent scrap pieces, but just a quick weathering over that black paint should do the job. The rest of the items that I've picked are actually just out of my scrap box. Now, some people might call this absolute sacrilege. This is a Hellion Class 25 body. Now I picked it up for a tenner from the Glasgow show, direct off the Hellion stand, and then I found that actually I couldn't get the detailing part to make it up into a complete workable body, because I wanted to rebody. I've got D, I think it's 7661 in the pre-tops D number blue, and I just wanted to create the tops numbered version. Found I couldn't do that, so it's been sawn in half, and that's going to be again more of our Vic Berry stack. Raiding my scrap box, there's quite a few interesting bits and pieces in here. This is an old Bachmann Class 04 shunter body that was actually originally in black, had been repainted badly a couple of times, never quite worked out. The chassis had long since gone for another project, so what I've actually done is I've painted it up in rail blue, and wasp stripes have been added to the front and to the back. Not the greatest wasp stripes that have ever been painted. They're actually incredibly tough to do, especially freehand, as I had to do. But again, that's another cab for the pile, something just a bit different, and I'm going to add the front part of this over here. And actually, one of the things I did do, because there is no chassis underneath, I glued some of these Pico PL9 mounting plates just to give a suggestion in the dark of a chassis, and also to support it at the right angle. Other items, that's a Bogey from a Queen Mary brake van from a Bachmann one. When you replace the couplings are actually moulded on, so you buy complete new bogies. And it meant that I've got a couple of these that used to have the big fat goalpost couplings, and just weathered up. They've again just inhabited my scrap box. Few of the bits and pieces. There's another part of that West Hill Wagon Works scrapped Class 25 cab, and I like the idea of dumping that between the track, just as a piece of discarded stuff. And then also The scrap crew are going to need their frequent cups of tea. So there's the brake bothy, which again was a project built by the Cupboard Monkey. I've given that a quick coat of matte white paint. I'll do the roof in a sort of rusty tin colour, and that's going to really just round off the scene that I'm going to build together. But before we do any of that, I'm going to get some ground cover on here, and I'm going to use some fine cinders, glue that down just as you would any kind of ballast, and then we're going to build up from there. With the ballasting done, and it's actually all still wet, I've just finished that, I'm going to move straight on to gluing in the various detail parts from West Hill Wagon Works. The reason for this is that the glues will kind of mix together and bond, and rather than being stuck on top of the ballast, we can kind of squish it in and it will all bond together as one unifying whole. So I'm just going to get on and do that. With the ballast all done and still actually quite wet, but I've glued all of the different detail parts in that I wanted. I'm going to leave this now probably about 24-48 hours to all set and dry and go hard. And then we're going to go in with weathering just to tone down all of this stuff. I want to do oil and grease on the ballast too. I've got a little technique using paint thinned right down, just painted straight on, add into that some weathering powders, and we'll also put some foliage just up against the back wall here just to disguise some of these parts. So I think a nice tree of some description tucked in there, maybe some small bits and pieces again along the back wall, just to bring the scene alive, make it look a little bit more lived in and organic is the order of the day. With 24 hours for the glue to dry, you can see we've got a good firm surface with these cinder ballast. And also all of the detailing pieces are nicely glued down, and all that glue is 100% set. But it just looks far too clinical, and this is where the weathering comes in. So at this stage I'm going to look at introducing some weathering washes. I've got rust and I've got black, really good trusty items just to give everything a bit of a muting down. That rail blue is really far too garish. I'm also going to use some of that Humbrol enamel thinned right down and paint that over the track, and that'll look like oil. And I'm really going to transform this quite neat cinder ballast into some really filthy, horrible looking ground where you can imagine oil and grease and dirt has been spilled and just saturated into that ballast. I've also got a selection of these weathering powders from Humbrol, and I'm going to be using these too, not just to matte down some of the scene, but to give a suggestion of rust and dirt. And I've got 4 different colours here to play with, different shades of rust and brake dirt, and maybe just try a little bit of this this green chrome oxide, just to give a suggestion of verdigris or that kind of green organic content that does tend to colonise items that are just left out in all weathers. First up, I'm going to just mute everything down with a good coat from this black weathering wash, and this does dry in this heat quite quickly, and it's just simply a case of making sure that we've got the weathering wash nicely mixed up, agitate the kind of dirt that's at the bottom, and this we're going to use just to mute down all of these items. And if you don't like the effect that you're getting, if you think it's a little bit too severe, we can always get a little bit more of the brush cleaning fluid and just wash away some of this dirt. And this doesn't matter if this gets into the terrain. If anything, that just helps blend everything in. Just gonna keep working on this. That yellow does look a bit bright, the blue as well, and this just helps start to mute down these colours. It's quite a simple process, but I'm going to get on with this Once I've managed to mute down all the blues and the yellows, I'm going to start to work as it dries with some of those weathering powders, and then I'll move on as well to adding in that oily residue using the Humbrol number 33 and a lot of brush cleaning fluid just to really give that effect. It's had a couple of hours to dry, and the enamel paint that I used has really worked well, and you can see that the ballast has become oily and dirty, and I've added in as well some of those weathering powders with that dark earth and rust colours, and you can see that that kind of builds in subtlety of tones to the ground. But we've still got a really neat edge, and what I want to do is add in foliage and a little bit of ground cover, and of course grass and weeds are all pervasive, so we need to add some of those in, and for that I'm going to use some of the War World Scenics static grass, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. First up, I want a little bit of vegetation, and I've used some sea foam here, and I've sprayed these in a variety of brown paints, and then over the top of that I've used yellows and reds. I've gone for a much more autumnal colour, and these are going to be the basis of trees that I'm going to add in just around the scene, and just to mute the join between the walls and this cinder ballast. The trees go in really well, and I've put in a little bit of the yellow and the red scatter as well, and it makes really quickly some quite autumnal trees and the foliage that comes off those trees. I've then used an assortment of the War World Scenics static grass, but applied with tweezers into neat PVA, just pushed it into the corners, some really fine green scatter just to get a verdigris to the walls, and I've sprayed it over liberally with the layering spray from War World Scenics, and a little dusting of some of the very subtle, quite dark greens and sort of yellowy greens verging on browns, just to build up extra texture. And we've talked about this before. Texture is really important in model form. Now there's just a few more bits left to do. I want to build up again the oily patches, and I'm going to do that by going back over with that black paint and the washes of dirty white spirit, and then it's simply a case of leaving this to dry and just to make sure that all is well, and our little diorama scene will then be finished. And this is the final scene. It's really come together with those last few detail additions, and you can see it went from being rather too neat to actually looking like somewhere that things are going to for their final destiny, that they hang around, that they're weather beaten, and that there's a lot going on here. Now, I haven't put in any figures, but this would be an ideal opportunity to add in various figures you can get from the Woodland Scenics Accents range, some workers which include men with an acetylene cutting torch, and that would be ideal to add into this scene. Now, talking you through the different details, let's start over here. I used the War World Scenics long 12mm static grass just to bed the wall into the ground. Now, it's never going to be 100% neat unless it had just been laid out, so that just adds a sense of realism. The tree itself is from the War World Scenics small tree set that you can buy, and then I've spray painted it in brown, and using the static grass layering spray I've added on the very fine yellow ground foam, followed by the very fine red, and that builds up a really nice autumnal look. And I think autumn is really good because it also makes the trees look like they're struggling in what could be some quite oily ground. Over here behind the buffer stops, we've got more of the same, and I always find it's important to add some of the yellow and the red scatter around the trees to bed them into the landscape and make them look like they're shedding leaves, that there's an organic build-up around the bottom, and you can move that over, as I've done here, onto the Class 04 shunter body to looking like stuff that's landed there, and give a suggestion of items that may have been in this scrapyard for quite some time. On the ground cover itself, those fine cinders ballast. I actually used from the Woodland Scenics range. I was able to pick them up. New old stock from a shop that still had them under £10. The RRP has gone up quite a bit since then. But on top of that, I've then used some gloss black household paint. And what that then does, and that's the kind of paint, it's oil-based, that you can use for painting wood, for painting metal. And I just sploshed it on around areas that I wanted to look oily and grimy. And I then used the dirty white spirit that I keep in a little pot for cleaning paintbrushes, and used that to thin it down, because as it goes on it's quite thick and gloopy and looks almost like somebody spilt molasses. And the dirty white spirit adds to the colour mix but then just spreads that out. And I actually, where I wanted it to look really oily, I did 2 coats of this. I waited for the first coat to soak into the ballast and dry, and it does go quite dull. And then I built up with a second layer on top of that, and again around some of these scrap items, just to make it look shinier, to get more of that paint to sit on top of the ballast, because that first coat has sealed it to stop it from soaking in. All of the items that we've got here, I did do a base coat of black Humbrol number 33 on a lot of these West Hill Wagon Works scenic items, and then over the top of that, to make it look really worn, I used some of the Humbrol weathering powders, and that's really broken up the look of those quite well and given them a sense of old, that they've been hanging around in the rain, so that rust has gone quite dark. It's not orange and angry and light, it's something that's been here for quite some time. I've used as well a lot of the weathering powders on some of these cabs. Again, it gives a much more matte finish, coupled with the dirty black Humbrol enamel wash. It's really muted down some of that Phoenix Paint's rail blue. So we've got our little pyramid, a nod to the Vic Berry scrapyard in Leicester. The 225s at the bottom, they are from West Hill Wagon Works, and again a different West Hill Wagon Works product. We've got the cab from the, I think it's a class 45, and it's shorn of its small nose bonnet, but that actually exposes some of this great detail. We featured that in a previous video, and it's now found a permanent home. The cut-up class 25 parts, again, run around the edges with the rust-coloured weathering powders, just to give a suggestion that where the gas axe has gone through, it's burnt off the paint and rust has set in. More of the War World Scenics 12mm grass around some of these junk items glued in at the back. Everything's had that dirty black wash. We've got some more of the weathering powders to give suggestions of rust, maybe even some fire damage to this class 25, which was the Hellion body that I had. And I wanted to give a really good reason for it to be here in the scrapyard. Next to that, the Bachmann 04 shunter, again, lots of weathering washes. That rail blue has really muted down with the weathering powders. For me, one of the highlight products is this class 52 Bogey, and again it's had the first coat of Humbrol number 33. When that is set, it's had the black weathering wash and then a whole host of the weathering powders built up, intermingled with some extra applications of the wash to just kind of tone it down. This Bogey is again from the scrap box. As we said before, it's one of the spare bogies from the Queen Mary brake van. I've decided to make this look like it's been here for a long time, hasn't got round to being cut up. So the colours are much lighter, it's got more of a verdigris, and I've built up some of that static grass around it. The Wills kit that the Cupboard Monkey built, the little tea place, that's had really good going over with the weathering, especially on the tin roof, and I'm really glad to have finally found a great home for this. I also painted it with Humbrol number 34, which is a matte white, just to kind of tone down some of that glossy plastic finish. Over the top of that, weathering powders, weathering washes, and try to get some really quite subtle colour streaks to that tin roof. And one final item that I'm adding to the scene, you may have wondered what happened to it. Well, we've got that Class 47 power unit on the flat roll, and this isn't glued down, but this is something that you can use to pose, move in and out of the yard. There's still a little bit of work to do on this. I've since learned that some of the pipe work would have been picked out in other colours, so this does give me the opportunity to keep work on detailing this up. But as it is, you can see it really is an exquisite, detailed product. And that's all come together to complete this scene. It's been a really good fun build. I've really enjoyed doing this, and it's used a lot of different products, but hasn't taken a lot of time. And certainly, if you're pushed on space, a diorama is great, but all of these techniques can be used to fill in a corner of your layout with an interesting scrapyard, and hopefully you've really enjoyed what's come together today. Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's video and found it informative. What did you think about the way all of these West Hill Wagon Works components went together? And don't forget that we do have a link in the description box down below to help you find some of the products that you've seen today, and also the rest of the West Hill Wagon Works' comprehensive catalogue. And I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Are any of these products that you've maybe used, or are they something that maybe you've looked at and thought, wow, I've got to have one of them for myself. So I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget as well, tickle the like button, share this video, and you can also head on over to Patreon and help support the channel to keep making these videos that you want to see. But until next time, this is me, Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCT decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Support also comes from TMC, the Model Centre. Check out their comprehensive and fully stocked website at themodelcentre.com. For project ideas, why not look at their airbrush offers at the link in the description and have a go at creating your own weathering and graffiti masterpieces. It couldn't be simpler. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Popper, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, and Jennifer Garrett. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.